So the Odyssey is finally here, and so many of us were excited to see the female characters.
Ithaca's king is coming back.
The story itself has such an impressive cast of them, from queens to goddesses to powerful seductresses and even female monsters. So if you were like me, you were probably excited to see how Nolan would bring them to life. But honestly, the movie just left me completely disappointed. The characters all had minimal screen time. There were many confusing changes made to their characters, and it just felt fumbled and almost like these women were less significant and autonomous than they were 3,000 years ago. The good, the bad, and the ugly all wiped off. Let's get into it. So let's begin with Helen and Clytemnestra. With the controversy of Nolan casting Lupita Nyong'o as Helen, we were all expecting the performance of a lifetime, but that got really confusing when we realized she would not only be playing Helen, but also Clytemnestra, her sister, who's not her twin. This was a really confusing decision, as the unwillingness to cast two women of color completely disempowers Helen's beauty by making it something that's shared by multiple women. Helen's beauty is also undermined by everyone repeatedly referring to the war and her involvement in it as Agamemnon's excuse for a war for trade routes instead of anything to do with her or her beauty. In the epic, when Telemachus meets her, she is happy and radiant, reunited with her husband in Sparta, making her dalliance with Paris seem like a silly mistake that she has agency over. Yet in the movie, she is maimed, abused, struggling to live alongside her monstrous husband. Does 3 minutes of screen time where her character is abused, maimed, and undervalued in any way balance out the abuse Lupita got for accepting this role? As some users on X pointed out, the subversion of Helen as the typical blonde-haired, blue-eyed, light-skinned woman carried little weight, as it felt like a subversion for subversion's sake. That being said, even with such little screen time, Lupita created such great differentiation between the two characters. It was just perfect. One thing I love about seeing Helen again in the Odyssey after Troy is that we get to see her as Helen of Sparta, the queen we never met, in her element, and removing that sense of power and just casting her as Helen of Troy is very limiting. Circe was probably a lot of people's most anticipated character, and I totally get why. She's not only Helios's daughter, but the goddess of sorcery, who is so powerful that she is exiled to an island. Yet when we meet her, she's pathetic, screaming, whimpering, begging. Odysseus's men repeatedly tell her that they mean her no harm, but she turns them into pigs anyways, which painted her character in a really weird, malicious light. Especially as the sequence is like very long and drawn out and manual and weird. I also want to take a moment here to talk about the crow she keeps in a tiny cage. Circe reveals that that's her sister and they get along better like this. This scene has obviously been constructed by Nolan and it seems really odd to me. Not only is Circe's sister the queen of Crete and a very powerful figure in mythology, she's never subjected to this fate, and this adds nothing to the plot except to make Circe seem malevolent and spiteful. Her sorcery and its threat of justice in punishing violent or power-hungry men and giving them what they deserve by turning them into pigs is diluted into a social ineptitude that she even has to exert over her own sister. They also remove any physical relationship between her and Odysseus and take away the scene in which she gives him advice on how to face the Sirens and Scylla, for example. Instead, he gets that advice from other male characters or has those ideas himself, which just dilutes her role as a guiding figure. Then we move on to Calypso, and this is where things get interesting. Women in mythology are not all flowers and sunshine. They're capable of being layered, complex, and downright evil. Calypso is a perfect example of this. Driven by her own intense loneliness, abandoned on an island, she keeps Odysseus imprisoned against his will, trapped as her lover, forcibly, for 7 years. Eventually, she releases him only because Zeus interferes and tells her to directly. Here, however, the character is shown as far more selfless. Calypso has to drug Odysseus with the lotuses from the Lotus Eater's Island, which has been brought in here for some reason, to help him through his pain when he's recovering. They seem to fall genuinely in love. and she assists him in getting his memories back the moment he expresses interest in doing so.
Remember.
Removing the self-centric lens by which Calypso acts and making her a palatable character makes her surprisingly forgettable. With an actress like Charlize Theron, this should be practically impossible. Yet the whole thing has little impact on the viewer. Overall, the femme fatale aspect of both Calypso and Circe's character seem to be entirely missing. Adding to that the lack of physicality and the weird dollar store fishnets and tank tops they seem to be wearing, there was nothing compelling or divine about either of these characters. Now moving on to what I was most excited for, Scylla, Charbydis and the Sirens. The Odyssey is known for its female monsters, from the many-headed Scylla to the beautiful singing Sirens. And yet in the movie, we see none of them. My whole theater was like holding its breath for Scylla's appearance. You can imagine the disappointment when all we see are some disembodied black tentacles with no monster attached. The entire sequence must be less than a minute, with neither Scylla nor Charybdis getting any screen time. Their female nature and hunger is completely ignored and not featured in the story. The Sirens sequence is probably the most memorable, with Matt Damon giving an incredible performance while he hears the siren song, but again, we don't hear it. The hypnotic power of the feminine archetype is non-existent. Moving on to Athena. Athena is the most central god in all of the Odyssey. Her role as a guide not only to Odysseus, to Telemachus as well, is essential. She repeatedly appears to Telemachus throughout the story as an older male figure called Mentor to guide him, escort him, and protect him. I kept waiting for the big reveal where Mentor is revealed to be Athena, but he's quickly killed and tossed aside. No worries, because at least we have Zendaya giving a generational performance as Athena, right? Well, that's what you think. In the last section of the movie, in a very interesting directorial decision, Nolan reveals to us that Zendaya was actually just a girl, perhaps a priestess of Athena, that Odysseus saw getting beheaded in Troy. His internalized guilt and grief has taken her form as the goddess and followed him throughout his journey. The second he accepts this, she disappears, showing that he was actually alone this entire time. While I'm sure there are many interesting interpretations of this arc, and the lack of divine guidance puts more emphasis on his own internal journey as a hero, Athena as a goddess character is still absent from the actual movie. Also, this being a reflection of Odysseus' conscience is very funny, considering that his actual personality is supposed to be very cunning, very sly, very clever, and he's always willing to do whatever it takes, even if others look down on it. But that on X said that an atheist should not make a movie so linked to worship. While I don't actually 100% agree with that, I do think the lack of belief in a higher power is evident throughout the storytelling here. Next we have Penelope. Penelope probably gets the best hand dealt to all the women characters, but there were still aspects of the characterization that just don't sit too well. Penelope's loom gets less screen time than I'd hoped for. She spends most of her dialogues either screaming at Telemachus that he's an ignorant boy or begging the suitors to spare his life. Changing Antinous' character from blatantly disrespectful towards her to trying to charm her would have been completely fine if that hadn't led to her undermining her entire loyalty to Odysseus by almost kissing him in a scene, and that just doesn't happen because the suitor character pulls away. Undermining her loyalty combined with her yelling about how the throne was hers gave off a slightly odd vibe. Not the elegant, strong Queen of Ithaca we know. But the biggest betrayal of her character comes towards the end of the movie. Penelope is prized for her wit and intellect, and she devises a plan to have Odysseus reveal himself by asking a question that only he would know the answer of regarding the construction of their bed. This is removed in exchange for him giving her a pin of hers that he was carrying throughout, completely removing the role of her intelligence and the very active role she's kept in safeguarding the throne for their family. So tell me, did these character changes weaken the narrative for you too? Personally, with all the American accents, modern day clothing, slang, and jumpy weird cuts, I found the movie a little hard to get into, but definitely a pretty entertaining watch. What changes would you make if you could? Let me know down below.